Now, what is the core principle of Ayurveda? So Ayurveda really teaches us about simplicity. Really, this is how I like to actually share it. It's such a simple. The core of the science is simple, but again, it's a very vast science. It's like, I don't think nobody can actually say, oh, medicine is such a simple science. No, medicine is really vast, right? Encompasses so many different elements. The same thing goes for Ayurveda and even more. So what I mean by simplicity is when it comes to the understanding of ourselves, it comes down to being in tune to the rhythms of nature through the understanding of the 5 elements. So if we understand the 5 elements, Ayurveda can give us a really good insight into the patterns that are associated to these elements. Again, it's sounding like probably Natalie speaking Chinese. Don't worry. It's going to be very simple once we start getting into. So let's start with the 5 elements. So we say the 5 elements, we have water, we have fire, we have air, we have space, and we have earth. So those 5 elements, Ayurveda actually groups them into 3 body constitutions. Body constitutions, you can imagine them to be just these packages of elements that have a certain order to them. So the first, so for example, let me just go back to the elements. Now, by understanding the elements, as I said before, we will understand more many aspects, not only of our psyche, meaning the way we analyze things, the way we ingest information, the way we think about certain things, because many of us, we think it's our personality. When I learned Ayurveda, I was like, oh, I can't believe I have been described in such a way. And this is just something I like to add. And back in the days, the history of Ayurveda is actually a very beautiful, but at the same time, very bloody and very sad story, because when England took over India, that Ayurveda pretty much almost died. And when the invasion happened, many Ayurvedic doctors were actually being persecuted and mutilated, mostly their hands, because they call it, right, in the text and the Vedics and the philosophy books and history books, they call them the white. And so when the English came to India, they thought that they were, how do you call them, like wizards, because Ayurveda can give, for individuals that study it, that really understand it and have devoted their lives to this science, just by looking at a person, you can tell what kind of illnesses they have, what kind of imbalances they have, what kind of thought patterns they have. So when the invasion happened, they thought, oh my God, these people are wizards. We have to get rid of them. But in reality, it's just such a complete science that we're always speaking. As people, we're always communicating. We're communicating, I'm Hispanic, so we tend to move our hands a lot, but we're always communicating through our facial expressions, obviously through our words, through our movement. And Ayurveda can tell. Sometimes I like to do that. I like to just sit down, and when I'm meeting people, I like to analyze certain things and say, oh, this person is definitely an air element. This is a Kapha element, which is earth. So I just wanted to say that to give you a context of the levels that Ayurveda can help an individual. Now, if you're in business, this is an amazing thing to actually gain, because it also allows you to read the person very fast. But this is not about actually pinpointing people. This science is to understand and be kind with ourselves and with each other. Now, I think I'm talking too much on that side. Let's go back to the quality. So we said that Ayurveda has 5 elements, right? Encompasses pretty much everything, is made up of the 5 elements. And this is not Ayurveda saying it. This is science saying it. This is chemistry, just science in general. Like physics says everything is made up of the 5 elements, the molecules, the atoms, gases, the tangible things, intangible things, everything is made up of the 5 elements. And of course, we are made up of the 5 elements. Now, those 5 elements have characteristics to themselves, right? So for example, help me to, if you want to say it, like if you want to just put it in the chat or something, what characteristics come to your mind when I say air? If we were to describe, that's the hardest one, by the way. If we were to describe the air element, what comes to our mind? So for example, It could be subtle, right? It's very subtle. It doesn't have any weight, so it's weightless. Clear, we don't really see air, things like that. Now, when we talk about fire, what are the characteristics of fire? So fire is bright, is luminous, is heating. So you see, it's in a very logical way. We don't have to get into very mysticism or very like complex thought patterns to identify the qualities of these elements, because it's not necessary. This is a very, very simple, very logical science, and is the main reason why I like it. I like practical things, and it's very practical. Now, if we talk about water, what we can say about water. Water is liquid. Water can be cold, depending what's the element around it. Water, it moves, right? So it's fluid, things like that. So for example, now there are characteristics to each of those elements. Once we understand what is our predominant element, for example, if you have more water, you have characteristics in you, not only in the tendencies that you have towards your body weight, towards your personality, towards the type of relationship the dynamics in your relationship, but in all ways. Now, let's start with an example. So we said that Ayurveda has these 5 elements grouped into 3 subgroups, which we call doshas, or these are body constitutions. And again, it sounds like it's complex, but I promise, give me 10 minutes and it's going to start making a lot of sense, especially when I start now diving deeper into each body constitution. And when I say body constitution, that also means the mental tendencies, meaning our entire self, even our spiritual tendencies, but we call it body constitutions or doshas. So the first dosha that we're going to talk about is Pita dosha. Pita dosha is composed of water and fire. Now, individuals that are Pita, they tend to have, what are the elements? So first, let's characterize the elements. So we have that is water and fire. So we said that fire is luminous, meaning it's bright. We also said that is very heating, right? Another characteristic to fire, it can be transformative, right? I mean, I absolutely love cooking. And one of the reasons I love cooking is also because of the transformative effect that it has. Like I put a little piece of something and I come out with this beautiful meal that is completely different shape. So that is the main characteristic of fire. It's the transformative aspect that it has. Now, when we incorporate those characteristics into a body constitution, we're actually saying if someone identifies themselves as Pita, they're going to have mostly these characteristics to themselves. Now, those characteristics can be balanced characteristics or it can be imbalanced characteristics. Now, let's start with the balance side. So for an individual that Ayurveda considers to be more fire, that has more of the fire element in them, these individuals physically, they tend to be medium built. So they're not very thin and they're not very thick. They usually are, their body, the weight fluctuates. Now, because the fire characteristic, again, is so luminous, these people have bright and very sharp minds. They're usually very, very, very intelligent. The intellect is, well, we're going to be diving much deeper into all of these in the other workshops, because this is just an intro. But so just to give you an idea, so let's try to associate, this is my invitation to you guys. Let's try to associate the normal characteristics of each element with the behavior that is associated to it. So like I said, the bright aspect of the element itself, it translates into brightness. It's just, they're very, very smart. They have a lot of fire in the mental capacities that they have. So there tend to be individuals that love studying. They love gaining knowledge. They usually are very driven. They're very ambitious in a good way. Extremely great leaders. This is, so for example, Obama, it's a Pita element. Most presidents are Pita elements. Why? Because they have to be very, very decisive. They have to be focused. They have to lead in ways that work. So how do you know that someone is Pita? Because whatever they put in their mind, whatever goal they set themselves, they just go for it. Pretty much this is what they say. Whatever they they focus on, they get it. And they do. That's because they're so driven. And in the positive side, these individuals tend to be also very transformative. Again, I'm talking about the balance quality when they are balanced. So this is the individuals that love mentoring others, that they really do have a passion about helping others with their intellect, this is individuals that are really good at identifying other people's talents. They can come up with a plan, and they're visionaries. They're, like I said, this is the type of individuals that you want as leaders, as managers, as professors, as anyone that's in front of you sharing something of knowledge, but at the same time with a plan of action. Now, as parents, these individuals tend to be on the rigid side. They're very rigid. They're with their kids. I'm going to be checking the time, guys. They're very, very strict. You see, there is no going around them. They tend to be very, and I'm sorry, that's my parrot, and I try to put it in the last room because he usually always flying around, but he can't today. So he's mad. So again, I want us to associate the fire with them. Now, when they are, remember how we said the fire element is luminous? When they are imbalanced, these individuals, they are blinded mostly by ego, by a drive for not so much money, but mostly for prestige. They need to always be, in a way, how can I say this? They need to have a lot of attention from people when they're imbalanced. And also because they're so driven and dedicated, at the same time, that causes them to be alone. Remember, the water element is associated with our emotions. So when they are so out of balance with their greed and their drive to just get whatever they want, whether it is a goal, a house, a career, whatever it is that they're trying to go after, one of their imbalances is that they truly believe that nobody can do it better than them, that they don't need anybody. And probably they don't. The only thing is the water element in them what happens when we boil water at a high temperature? It evaporates. So the same thing happens with these individuals. When the drive is so big, in the element of fire is so out of control in them, from a personality perspective, they tend to withdraw from people and do everything on their own. They become very hostile as leaders. They become very argumentative. They become just very aggressive individuals. Now, what are the physiological aspects of these elements? So it's fire, remember, it's heat. So they tend to have everything. In medical terminology, we have something that is called itis. So tendonitis, bursitis, anything that ends in itis is inflammation. So they suffer from all sorts of inflammation. So when they're imbalanced, they have acid reflux. The bowel movement tend to be liquided in the liquid side because there's so much acidic. Their body is very acidic. So I hope this is making sense, how we start associating the characteristics, the logical characteristics of the elements to a specific tendencies, not only in our personality, but also in ourselves. So again, let's just go back. We can read over here, actually. So when they're imbalanced, they have excellent agility, meaning they are so motivated. They're very active mentally and physically. These are the individuals that if you ask them, how do you like to work out? They usually love high impact sports, especially competitive sports, anything that has to just get them going and proving themselves to the world. Now, because the fire is so big in them, so the fire also creates dryness, right? If we just put something near a plant, for example, or it's very hot outside, our plant is going to get dry if it doesn't have water. Now, they're very creative, energetic, they're flexible, they love excitement and new experiences. Now, how do we balance these individuals? And again, this is the intro, so it's going fast, but in the following workshops, we're going to see each dosha, just Pita, Vata, and Kapha. So we understand much more into much more of their tendencies and how to balance their imbalances. Now, for example, I'm Pita. My first element is fire, and my second element is Kapha. So from the fire perspective, this is what I'm doing. You see, I like sharing things with the world. And one of the best way to balance the very harsh or imbalances of Pita is love. I know it sounds like, oh, okay, this is so cliche, but for this particular constitution, remember the water, when it's imbalanced, that means it evaporates all the water in them, and the water is associated with their emotions. They're actually very loving individuals, very, very, very kind individuals. But when the fire is too much in them, they don't care about that. The water is pretty much gone. So we have to bring more water in our lives, usually with these individuals, through sweet flavors, through sweet, sweet foods, keeping them out of the heat, please. If you associate yourself, and I say, wow, I think this lady is actually describing me and I don't even know her. And again, wait until you see the follow-up workshops. Again, just try to incorporate very loving things into your life. Try to reach out to people that you haven't been in contact with, and be honest to say, hey, I'm sorry, I just been kind of missing in action. I was just thinking of you. I hope to see you soon. Just try to incorporate yourself. Now, if you know someone in your life, if it's your spouse or your kid, your teenager, be very loving towards them, and super, super, we have to be very patient with them, because again, they withdraw. They can be very out there, but we withdraw from everybody when they fire. So they isolate themselves in very harsh ways that it manifests in many different illnesses physically, but also in mental tendencies that are very heavy for them as well. So they need compassion, a lot of compassion from people as they regain their balance. And of course, as we go and we learn more in detail, we're going to learn also what kind of foods, what kind of movements, what kind of exercises, what kind of meditations, what kind of just regular activities as a normal human being helps them. But this is just for the intro. Now, this is the Pita element. Let's talk about, we already talked about this. I should have moved it, how we can balance it. Now, let's talk about Kapha. The Kapha dosha is, let me see what time it is. The Kapha dosha is actually water and earth. This individual, you can think of them, in India, they like to bring an elephant into a person's mind when they talk about Kapha. Why an elephant? Because elephants are very, very, they have great memory. They tend to be slow. They're very gentle. They're on the heavy side of things, but they also have such presence to themselves. As a matter of fact, in India, the elephant is considered a very holy animal, right? Very worshipped, very, very, very cared for because of the nature that it has. It's very loyal. It's very, very, very caring to not only the herd in general, but also to other individuals. Now, the Kapha is the same. Kapha is considered as earth, so you can think of Mother Earth. These individuals, when they are, let's go back to the characteristics of earth. Earth is stable, it's heavy, it's cold, and it's kind of dark, right? Like earth, it has a color to it. Now, these tendencies are also in them. Their body type tends to be the heaviest of the three body types. So they tend to be thick individuals. They're not thin, and they're not necessarily, people sometimes say, oh, they're obese. No, they're not. They're just on the thick side of things. You see, back in the days in India, they used to, because Ayurveda was before the invasion, they used to, when slavery was in place, they used to pick the Kapha individuals for the biggest, the most, because they were when it comes to the slaves, they were the strongest of all. Kapha has a huge stamina. It's all about strength, mental strength, character strength, physical strength, because of the element that they carry. Now, when they're balanced, these individuals are not easy to get in balance. You see, just things come to them and they're very stable. They tend to have a very gentle nature to themselves. These are the individuals that usually people come to for advice. People come to for comfort. So think about Mother Earth. Mother Earth is so loving. You put a seed and it just grows. So it's metabolic, right? It's a very metabolic element. So everything kind of grows with them. You give them a home, you give them a house and they make it into a home. They tend to be these individuals, the grandmothers that you go to their house, like they don't know what to do. They cook for you, they hug you, they kiss you, they tell you all day how much they love you. There's just people that are so kind and so loving, but at the same time, very stable. They have strong faith, strong characters. There usually are individuals, again, that are very good to have them as advisors in a company, as advisors, as counselors, because they are all about others, all about giving, all about in the stamina that they have. They don't get sick very often, and when they do, it's usually associated with an imbalance. Now, how do they get imbalance? Again, now we go back to the same elements. The dark, you see, is heaviness. It's also kind of dark in color, and combined with water, it can make mud. So these individuals tend to, when they're in balance, attachment. You do something to them and they're not going to forget it. It's very hard for them to forgive when they are not balanced, because it creates this muddiness in their psyche. You see, this kind of like the water and earth get all muddy. Now, at the same time, these individuals tend to have asthma, everything. So kapha actually means in Sanskrit, phlegm, mucus, because, and it's this white element, white matter. So in our bodies, kapha represent in imbalances, mucus, congestion, edema, when we retain water. At the same time, heaviness of mind, anxieties that has a lot to do with things that they cannot let go from the past. Usually anxiety is when your mind is in the past. Now, I'm sorry, about the future. So the other aspect of them is depression. All of the elements have obviously these characteristics to them when they're in balance: depression, anxiety, but they manifest differently. For Pita, the depression tends to be an active depression. They just do things while they're depressing and they just kind of numb themselves. Now, Kapha just give themselves to death. Like, that's it. I'm never going to get up. I don't want to shower, things like that. Thankfully, because my first element is Pita, my Pita dosha that is so strong and stubborn and fiery sometimes gets my kapha out of those weird state of minds through doing things like that. And to be honest, I'm actually doing these because I'm going through great grief. And I'm only sharing this just to show you how we have to be very active in our healing. And usually I have always identified myself with heavy kapha characteristics because ever since I'm a child, people say, Natalie, even people around me, the doctors, you get hit and I don't even feel it. I no joke. I sometimes get these big black and blues all over my body and I have no idea how it happens, because I can take pain, physical, mentally, and it's my vata. This is my kapha in me. Now, when I do get depression sometimes, like depressed states, they tend to be heavy, but I've noticed that my first element, which is Pita, it's very active. So I immediately say, okay, Natalie, do something. Remember how you balance yourself. Remember how you get this kapha state out of your mind. And I said, by movement, by just bringing more movement. Why? Because now another way to balance is to bring the opposite element. Remember, we said heavy, right? It's a heavy state. So when people are depressed, or when people are going through severe grief, or when they're going through just heartache, things that are really difficult in life for everybody, regardless of the dosha that they have. So we have to be proactive. We have to do something. And part of what I'm doing, like I said to myself, let me just go back to my workshops because they bring so much joy into my life. And it's a great way for me to balance my kapha dosha with action, with activity. I'm just putting this as an example, as a real world example of how we balance. And in the other workshops, we're going to be learning much more detail on the activities that balance these elements. Now, the physiology side of kapha, to be Yes, because I have. Perfect. The physiological side of Kapha, now again, because of the heaviness that they have, Kapha is, you see, they're slow. I like to do my things. Again, I'm kind of fast because of because of my Pita, but at the same time, sometimes I can see my Kapha and I'm like, there's time. You see, on weekends, on weekends I'm 100% Kapha. I don't want to do too many things, and I like peace and quiet, and I go to places that are very, very nurturing because I need to balance my Pita. But physiologically speaking, we said that it's phlegm. Also, their digestion tends to be very slow. They have a good digestion. They have everything in them is strong. But they have a slow digestion. So it's very good for them to eat not big portions, and also to have longer breaks between them. But we're going to we're going to talk more about it in the other segments. And again, the way we balance this dosha is with activity. You see, Pita is with a lot of love, bringing just more warmness into their life, more Kapha qualities into their lives. Now for these is bringing more the Vata quality, which we're going to see next, which is more movement. A Vata, a Kapha, we need to move it because it's, again, think about the elephant, very wise, very slow, very, very observant, but we need to bring movement into their life. So very simple, just go for a walk, join a team, yoga, again, just do something, or create videos that makes you talk and bring so much movement into your own mind. Now, we are moving now to, I should have just deleted this ones because we're not really using them too much. Vata. So the Vata element this is different. This one doesn't have water. It's actually space or ether and air. So individuals that Ayurveda considers them to have the main element to be predominant to be air and space, we call them Vatas. These are individuals now, they are thin. They usually are on the thin side of things, but this is the body type that fluctuates the most. What do I mean by that? Sometimes they're fluctuating like crazy on all aspects. Why? Because again, let's talk about the movement, the qualities of air, for example, of space. Space, it just gives space. So it's usually a containment. Now for air, it's movement, right? It can be cold and it can be dry. Those are qualities to the air element. So the qualities now in the personality or body type of these individuals, you see them again on the thin side. They tend to have dry skin. They tend to have like joints that are cracking all the time. They usually have very uneven features because nothing is even with them. Nothing is stable. They don't have the earth element to them, or water element that's a little bit heavier. They're constantly now, but at the same time, when they're balanced, moving out away from the physiological characteristics and more into the psychological characteristics. And when they're balanced, these are great performers. We owe Vata everything that you see about actors, singers, public speakers. So expression is all air, right? It has to do with the movement of the movement of sound, the movement of expression. So these individuals are also super, super joyful. Joy is Vata. Vata is this element of, they call it the heart of a party. When you go to a party and you see individuals that it's just like, wow, this person is just shining. So much energy, so much like livelihood. They have this beautiful, someone comes to mind when I'm actually talking about this, and anyways, she is so awesome. And she just embodies this energy so well. Now, when they are not balanced, they are very scattered. They start things, they never finish. They start 100 million things and it's hard for them to finish. Also, anxiety when it comes to like constant thinking, because there are many types of anxiety, especially in the psyche. But these individuals are usually very, very worried about every little thing. They get cold very fast. Everything is cold. Everything they hate, they cannot stand the cold. They need always very warm things. If you ask them, they tend to eat very light, mostly salads. They're on the light side of things, but they need the opposite, because we have to balance we have to balance these doshas, this elements with the opposite element if we're talking about imbalances. Now, you might say, how do I know exactly who am I? I'm going to be sharing to everybody's email. So if I don't have your email, please leave it in the chat or send me an email with your email. Send me an email, of course, so I can send the resources. And one of those resources is a test that you do to see your imbalances. Now, we all have, let me see. Okay, we all have our specific we have a specific mental characteristics, but there's also 3 mental gunas that we have. Now I'm moving away from the doshas. Now I'm looking into the gunas. So these are like mental states. Well, this is not just for the mental, but I'm talking about the psychological aspect of this characteristic. So we have tamas, sattva, and rajas. Tamas is dull. It's usually, like very, very in the cycle of life, represents sort of death and destruction, but it's also an extremely needed cycle of life in general. Now we have sattva. Sattva is usually clarity, it's usually calmness, it's usually high levels of awareness, it's love, compassion. And rajas is where most people are, which is this, we need to work, we need to do things. It's very energetic, very dynamic. It also distorts awareness because the ego is very much involved. I'm only bringing these to your attention because this is how we also going to start analyzing our mental patterns, our mental states by these 3 elements, these characteristics of mental states, tama, sattvas, and rajas. We all go through all of them, and it's necessary for the anabolic and metabolic aspects of our own growth as humans, but also in the entire overall of life. We see this, the cycle, right? The cycle of birth, life, and death. In a plant, in ourselves, in our minds, in our thoughts, in our projects. We see this everywhere in our relationships. People come and go. It's just, now, Ayurveda is very spiritual, at least how it was taught to me, how I learned Ayurveda from my teachers. And we don't need to get into diets. We don't need to get into all of that. It's literally understanding how to create sattvic states in our lives. Sattvic states is cooking more mindfully, cooking more loving. Even if you're not cooking something healthy, the energy is there. You can transform the energy of the food, but we're going to be diving much more deeper into these in the next segment. I just wanted for you to have awareness of these. This is part of the spirituality of it, and I'm about to now close so we can now move with Sridhar. Ayurveda, the end goal of Ayurveda, or all the Vedic traditions, yoga, all the Vedic sciences, is to bring us to the level of awareness of unity. It doesn't matter what religion you have. You can be Christian, you can be Jewish, you can be from Sikh, from all sorts of religion. It doesn't matter. It has nothing to do with that. It has all about to understand that we're never alone. And Ayurveda brings us to that level of awareness, brings us to that level of understanding that you are loved, that you have a purpose here in this life. And it doesn't have to be a grandiose purpose. We have the purpose of just, if you were given an energy, just try to work with your own element, not trying to create an opposite element in you, and always understanding that we're never alone, that everything is interconnected. And this is pretty much the end goal of Ayurveda, and how we manage everything in our lives is through this concept. Okay. Now, thank you so much. It was, again, this is an intro, so there's a lot of information. I'm going to be sending resources for you guys to read. In the upcoming workshops, we're going to see each dosha, Vata, Pita, and Kapha in detail, so we can learn much more about them. I hope this was informative. I hope you now have a better understanding of what Ayurveda is. And thank you so much for being here.